cause of who's in the White House. This is no matter who's there. The very idea that Congress has to declare war, but they don't have to declare that it's okay to nuke people. There need, in a nation and a system that's built on checks and balances, this one thing doesn't could have sufficient.
The most consequential thing has no check and balance.
Yeah, it shocked me. I don't know if you knew about that earlier. I mean, literally, I thought that there had to be approval of the staff, or at least the majority of cabinet members or something. But in fact, there is no check on that.
I would like to think that if somebody decided to go rogue and do it, that there would be somebody sensible nearby, some Secret Service person who would do what that Russian missile did.
Well, one hopes that, I mean, the people actually have to press the button, and their button is bigger than his. They would, it's a sober, I mean, you actually have to do it. I think those people think very carefully, but, they're trained to realize that they have to do that, and so it's
and they drill it all the time.
All the time,
yeah.
So I wonder how this ties in to, I try not to paint with too broad of a brush when I talk about any specific religion, including Christianity, but there are a number of Christians, including some of my family members, who are eagerly awaiting Armageddon. We all deal with people who construct conspiracy theories on occasion. I don't think it'd be that hard to put together a conspiracy theory that the reason we have Trump is because there were people who are okay with the idea of Armageddon. Because I know tons of evangelicals who were supportive of him, when there's nothing about this man that fits like the churches I went to, even though I know those churches are waiting for an apocalypse.
The most benign interpretation of the Christian support is just their calculated assumption, which is borne out, that he will give them what they want because they're a voting bloc that he needs. I remember I ran into Ralph Reed, the former head of the Christian Coalition, at a conference, and this was still during the campaign when Trump was the nominee, and was professing to be a Christian of some flavor. And I had debated Reed once on television, but we actually had never met, and I said to him, "There's no way you think he's actually a person of faith, right? How do you explain the Christian support?" And he immediately fell back on this trope, who am I to judge what's in another man's heart? Insofar as I could tell that he was bullshitting, he was really bullshitting.
He's happy to judge what's in other people's hearts.
Yeah, right. But the worst possible interpretation is the one you just gave, which is there's at least some millions of people, and maybe tens of millions of people in this country, for whom biblical prophecy is real. It's a real roadmap to the future, and they're expecting the wheels to completely come off this car before the end, and that will be the best thing that happens. That's necessary for the best thing that will ever happen to happen.
I have to say that since Trump got elected, I've been sort of hoping for Armageddon too, but in a way, it just seems better than listening to tweets every day. But I actually don't think it's the Armageddon thing. I was actually just thinking about writing a piece about this, and I'll say it, although it'll get people angry, some people. To me, it represents one of the real problems of professed Christianity, because when you said they don't think Trump is a Christian, but they'll get what they want. What do they want? Do they want the things that they're supposed to be abandoning, like love and all the things? No, what they want is hate. What they want is laws that restrict freedom of others. And that means to me that operationally, in this country, when it comes to the politics, professed Christianity is equivalent with hate.
Well, to bend over backwards, before,
I wanted to see if there's anyone who I can't tell.
The most charitable interpretation is not that it's synonymous with hate all the way down the line, because just imagine if you're someone who really thinks that abortion is akin to murder, right? That there is no difference between killing a fetus at the 8-week stage and killing a fully developed human being. If you think that, then you think our society is just spectating on a Holocaust that has been going on for your entire life. And it's easy to see how someone would not be moved by hate and would in their own mind be moved by compassion and love and a concern for divine retribution if they believe that God is watching all the while.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's extreme to say that. You could say the same thing about restricting the rights of gay people. That it's really love, because that's a sin in a lot of people's hearts, and therefore trying.
Insanely, you can say the same thing about members of ISIS who were throwing gay people off of rooftops. Some of you must have seen this footage of ISIS members hugging, with apparent sincerity, the people they were about to hurl off of rooftops.
Because it's a loving
this was not a naked declaration of hate. This was, sorry, this is how the game is played. We have to do this.
Well, that represents to me that, I mean, that's the paradox. So, and I don't know if I've said it before on stage to you, but Steve Weinberg was a physicist friend, a Nobel laureate, and also an atheist, has said that there are good people and there are bad people. Good people do good things, bad people do bad things. When good people do bad things, it's religion. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. So people are, and it's not just religion, it's ideology. Whenever people move away from reason, and justify, and we all do it, but justify bad actions, and as if no one, I think very few people do bad things thinking they want to do a bad thing.
Right.
They're doing it for some reason that they think is a good reason.
Well, we can go right back to Voltaire to address all this, which is, you can get people, if you can get people to believe absurdities, you can get them to commit atrocities.
Yeah.
And once you have poisoned the foundation, which I think is a hallmark of what many religions do, of right and wrong, of about how we should go about determining what is a moral good, if you poison that sufficiently, that's how you get people to do that. That's how you get them to bomb abortion clinics. That's how you get them to throw homosexuals off roofs. Which kind of brings us to one of the questions. We polled a little bit. I asked for suggestions on Facebook, and Sam had asked on Twitter. And there's a couple things that keep coming up, but I think, given what we're talking about, this issue of morality terrifies believers. I've been told that, atheists can't be moral, and then the people who have put like another half-second thought into it will say, well, of course you can be moral, but you can only be moral because you were raised in a Christian environment that taught you about morals. And I gave a talk for a number of years, but you wrote The Moral Landscape, and I want you to just take a couple of minutes and give a summation of objective reality, science-based assessments, and why people don't have to be terrified, and why it may in fact be more terrifying if morals are just the dictates of some individual or being.
Well, it's clearly more terrifying if the Bible is true, or the Quran is true, because then the universe has been created and is now governed by an omniscient sadist. Right? He's created a universe with hell to be populated by people who he didn't give enough evidence to convince them of the truth of his doctrine. Right? So he could have just given enough evidence and we'd all be fundamentalist Christians or Salafi Muslims. But the miracles are always thousands of years old, or they're in India or somewhere, and strangely they're in places where...
Same place UFO sightings are.
Or upstate New York.
Okay. But they're not sort of like the UFO abductions and the cattle molestations. It could happen right here, right now, in front of 2,000 educated people, and we would all be convinced. But that's not going to happen for some perverse reason.
I'd still be skeptical.
Yes.
I'd still be skeptical.
We would still be,
But
we would
you
demand...
can imagine if you're in dialogue with an omniscient being who's bent upon convincing you for your own good, that can happen very quickly.
You right now.
Well, apparently I'm dumbing it down a lot.
So, but to tie into what he's saying, I've had Christians tell me that God wouldn't reveal himself to me because I would continue to question, deny. And I'm like, what kind of weak-ass God do you believe in who is incapable of convincing me?
Yeah.
Oh, you're just too damn obstinate.
So let's leave that. So we can leave that aside. There's something strange about believing that these books, as written, give you a truly moral worldview that you would endorse. If any person behaved the way the God of the Bible behaves, that is our definition of a psychopath and a sadist. But the reason why you can have objective morality, or I think that you can have a few short steps to objective morality. And what I mean by objective is not that it's all just a matter of atoms. The universe includes subjective experience. It includes consciousness is a natural phenomenon. Consciousness is a property of the universe. We don't know exactly at what stage it emerges in information processing in complex systems, or maybe it goes even deeper than that. I mean, it's totally possible that there's some spooky view of consciousness going further down than than vast numbers of neurons or information processing units doing their thing. There's no especially good reason to believe that, I would say.
A lot
but
of
still,
good reasons not to believe.
yes, but still, it's not. The jury is arguably still out on that. What it's not still out on is a few fundamental questions. One, clearly consciousness exists, even if we're living in a simulation on some alien hard drive. Something seems to be happening, right? And that seeming is what I'm calling consciousness. So even if you're a brain in a vat right now, or you're in the Matrix, or this is all just a dream and you're going to wake up in a few minutes and find yourself in bed, no matter how confused you might be about your circumstances, there is still consciousness and its contents in each moment. And there is a vast difference between excruciating and pointless misery and sublime happiness and creativity and joy and love and all of the good things in life. And we have no idea how far that continuum actually goes in both directions, but we really know, that we like one side of it much better than the other side of it. And we don't have to justify that preference. You don't have to justify preferring the happiest possible life to being tortured for eternity, right? And the idea that you would need some philosophical argument to justify that is just a specious claim that has confused a lot of people. And the idea that you would need to be able to draw your preference there, again, for avoiding the worst possible misery for everyone, that you'd have to draw that from some book that has been dictated by an omniscient being, that also is a specious claim. So I view morality as a kind of navigation problem, and the reason why this is of a piece with ultimately a scientific understanding of the mind and a scientific understanding of human well-being and of conscious systems generally is that navigating between these two ends of the continuum of experience, avoiding the worst possible misery and finding true bliss and creativity and connection and love, there are right answers about how to do that for properly constituted minds. And there are, for us, there are biochemical answers, there are psychological answers, there are sociological answers, there's economic answers, political answers. Every piece of human knowledge that's legitimate knowledge has to be brought to bear on the question of how to live a fulfilling life. And it is possible to be wrong, and it's possible to not know what you're missing, and it's possible to be right for the wrong reasons. And so every permutation of ignorance and confusion is there to be suffered and endured, and we have to break the spell of thinking that we need to live forever shattered by tribal dogmatisms in order to talk about there being right answers to moral questions.
As Sam knows, we had another Origins event where Sam was at talking about exactly this and had a bunch of
We got a lot of pushback from...
Yeah, we got a lot of pushback. Yeah, but so I think that, you know, I've had a lot of discussions about this since then, and it may be, it is probably true that reason is the slave of passion for most people. We possess reason, but reason doesn't necessarily drive our actions.
Yeah.
And we justify things after the fact on the basis of what we want it to be, and then we come up with a rational argument for it. I think that's true.
Understanding that is another exercise of reason.
Exactly. And
for clarity, there's flawed reasoning, but that doesn't mean that reason itself is flawed.
No, but I think we're capable, and you and I and everyone in this audience does it, that we all rationalize our lives every day. We, you know, wake up, we rationalize that we like our work or our spouse or whatever else it is in order to get through the day. And
let it be known that I didn't nod my head to that.
Yeah, that's right. Let it be noted. But
only audio.
But you know, and so I'm not 100% convinced that you can always get ought from is, as some famous philosopher once said. But I do think I agree with you completely that it's a process that without is you can't get ought. I think that's the point. Without is you can't get ought. If you don't know the consequences of your actions in any way, and that's what science is. Science tells you or reason. But I view science as sort of reason based on empirical evidence. Then you can't possibly make decisions that you can't determine what's right or wrong.
You need to know what the goal is and what the outcome is going to be.
What the outcome is going to be. So without a careful understanding of and then some people call this utilitarianism, I guess, but I just see it as without science there can be no morality, in my opinion, or no sensible morality. And I think what we've seen, and Pinker and others have argued, I think, pretty effectively that in some ways the Enlightenment and rational thinking has led to a world where some things that were once thinkable are not thinkable now. And so there's no doubt, I don't know whether I would argue that we can, well, certainly I would argue that we might not be able to understand morality now, but that's irrelevant, because we agree that not understanding something is not evidence of anything but not understanding. The more we learn, the more we will understand. So I do think ultimately we'll have a neural understanding of almost all our decision-making capabilities. But certainly without that reason, I don't think you could even discuss the question.
Well, let me just take 1 minute to say why I think this is-ought business is totally confused. This comes from a paragraph in Hume's work where he was actually trying to hold religious conceptions of morality at bay. And I think it's been misinterpreted, it's certainly been overused as one of these exports from philosophy that has just gotten into the heads of everybody and is influential, totally out of proportion to its actual validity. One thing I would point out is that Hume said he found many seeming paradoxes, and one was with respect to causation.
Yeah. And
if you took him seriously about causation, you couldn't really take science very seriously, because apparently there's no evidence of causation in the world. We just see the contiguity of various events, but we never see causes between A and B. So this is ought business. Let's say there is no ought, there is no should, there is no obligation to do anything in this universe. There is just what is. There's just the totality of facts that are actual and perhaps possible, perhaps also impossible. Whether there's such a real thing as possibility, or everything is in fact actual, it's just happening in a parallel universe, right? Or trillions upon trillions of such universes. There are only facts. And the first thing I would ask you is, if you can't get your sense of how you should live from the totality of facts, all of reality, where do you think you can get this sense of how you should live? So you're not impoverished having all the facts of the universe at your disposal. And you still have, even if there's no such thing as morality, we still have this navigation problem. Put your hand into a wood chipper and see how much you like it, right?
Yeah.
You will very quickly get the message that you don't want to do that again. You will want to avoid that, and there are an infinite number of ways in which we can experience pointless misery from which no good comes, and we will find ourselves navigating. And all I'm arguing is that we call morality those subset of behaviors and commitments that relate in social space to this navigation problem of finding better lives together. And if you were alone on a desert island, you wouldn't call it morality, but you would still talk about well-being and happiness. And so.
I agree completely. I guess the question is one of what one calls objective morality, if you want to use those terms, in the sense that everything you said, I think, is clearly true. The question I would have is that at the same time, because that navigation effort is sort of has an evolutionary basis as well as a cultural basis. I think
we know evolution is wrong on most of these questions.
Yeah, but I think that our thinking has an evolutionary basis, and I don't think that. I think it's clear that that's the case.
Yeah.
Then it means to me that morality is a moving target too. The question is so that humans are hardwired, I think, to find some things moral and not, and that's an interesting question to find out how they are. And as you know, some psychologists do test the famous trolley car experiment, and so. When one talks about objective reality, I think it's based on a totality of experience, but that totality of experience evolves, and therefore I'm a little more hesitant in talking about absolute morality.
Yes.
Well, no,
I don't use absolute.
Yeah, but it's evolving into a space of right and wrong answers and real facts about the conscious experience of actual and possible being. So there's a right answer to the question of